is Joanne Galloway. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Change, a Northern Michigan advocacy group. And we are so excited to be hosting the first ever Northern Michigan Education Summit. So today we're going to be having a lot of conversation about education, where things are at, with a lot of the ways we handle education here in Michigan, how it's funded in Michigan, and then we're going to meet several of our Northern Michigan school board members and hear a little bit about their thoughts as well. So I appreciate you joining us, and if you're watching this later, I'm so glad that you're taking the time to do that. So I first want to take just a moment and introduce myself a little bit. My parents both went to public school in the Thumb area of Michigan. My dad was a farmer. I myself graduated from Pickford Public Schools in the Eastern Upper Peninsula. I then went on to Grand Valley State University, where I have a degree in advertising and public relations, but again, another public institution. So I come from a family really steeped in public education. My 3 children, as a matter of fact, all graduated from public schools in the Eastern Upper Peninsula, 2 of them from the Rudyard area schools and 1 from the Pickford Public School. My father was a longtime school board member in Pickford, as a matter of fact. I actually have a story I think that you'll really enjoy about my dad. He, was a farmer, and he was also very involved with the Northwoods Christian Camp that's just south of Pickford. And one of the things that he got involved with there as a board member was helping them to manage their woodlots there on the property. And so the one year, they decided that they would get involved in helping the community by donating the lumber for new bleachers at the Pickford football and track stadium. So the thing that was very interesting as they worked through this project was the dejection of finding out that you couldn't actually use the full rough sawn lumber to build the bleachers. It didn't meet current building code for bleachers. So what they ultimately ended up doing was they sold the lumber and used the proceeds from the lumber to buy the commercial lumber that are the seats that you would sit on if you went to the Pickford Public Schools today to watch a football game or to sit and watch a track meet. So anyways, that was part of my family history. So as an adult, I've been very involved with organizing things in my community, whether it was a livestock showing clinic or a food safety clinic for preparing people for selling products at farmers markets, or a middle school quiz bowl, as a matter of fact. I, over the years, really, honestly, am not one that's followed government, elections, politics, or any of those types of things. However, a chain of events a few years ago led to for me to run for office in 2018. I ran for state representative in the 107th House District, and it was out of that race that the Center for Change was formed. It was out of the energy and the people that came out of the woodwork that shared the values that I had and the reasons that I was running for office, who eventually got together after the election and said, okay, so there's things that we feel like need to be changed, whether it's better funding for education or being protective of our water and making sure we have clean drinking water and pristine, beautiful places in Michigan for people to visit. These are all things that we're very concerned about. And so we continue to work and did a lot of research, honestly, and to understand how things work. And we formed a 501c4 nonprofit, which is a nonpartisan organization called the Center for Change, a Northern Michigan advocacy group. So our mission is to inspire, to educate and empower our neighbors for collective and progressive advocacy. We do that work around 7 task forces. So we have one that focuses on climate, another on healthcare, one that focuses on water, while another one focuses on family and social services, another on renewable energy, and the 7th on, let me lean my screen so I can read it. Oh yes, this is one that's dear to my heart, connectivity. So I'm so thrilled today to see who's been able to join the Zoom call and who's been able to actually open up the agenda to look at it, and who's able to watch this video actually on their Facebook, because I remember many years sitting at the farm not being able to get a video to play. I remember wanting to watch the testimony of a committee meeting in Lansing at our Capitol, and it buffered so bad. I probably only got to see 5 minutes of it after sitting there for an hour watching it. But anyway, the Center for Change is made up of a group of volunteers, some who are task force leads for the task force, and many who volunteer in other ways, whether it's educating people about the process, or if it's writing letters, making phone calls, and just making our voices heard collectively in Northern Michigan. So again, thank you for joining us today. And I'm gonna kind of transition now into telling you a little bit about a partnership that we've created with the Michigan Education Justice Coalition. So that was one of the goals as we formed the Center for Change, was to find institutional knowledge that we sometimes found was kind of lacking in Northern Michigan. And when we find that institutional knowledge, we want to build relationships and maintain those relationships. So when there's something that we need to advocate for, we have the resources available to us to know how to do that and make the connections that we need to make. So Rachel Fewer, who is our education task force leader, several years ago made connections with the Michigan Education Justice Coalition as she sought for a more just system for education. And the Michigan Education Justice Coalition had actually formed several years before out of some work that was being done in the Southeast Michigan area. And they knew as they continued to do their work that they wanted to grow out into a larger statewide coalition. And they're made up of parents, community members, there's even students involved in the Justice Coalition, and they believe that every student in Michigan deserves a healthy and healing public school experience. And we're so excited to partner with them going forward so that Northern Michigan interests can be represented as we do this work, and that we make sure it's an educational system that works for everybody in our state. Oh, and I'm going to flip this back over to you, and I need to get a screen closed so I can see the agenda again.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. My name is Owen Goslin, and I work with Joanne at the Center for Change. I live in Sheboygan, and I grew up attending public schools in Cross Village, the old school townhouse there, the one-room schoolhouse before it closed, and then in Sheboygan, and I graduated in 1993. And so I'd like to tell you a little bit more about what were the issues that drew us to work on education and to find a partnership with the Michigan Education Justice Coalition. A lot of it has to do with funding and school equity. And as many of you probably know, there is a very big, a long couple of decades problem now with the funding structure in Michigan for our schools. As I mentioned, I graduated in 1993. So a lot of what's happened has actually taken place since I left public school. And if any of you are like me and in your 40s or older, you may not know the full story about our school funding problems in this state. I'm just sharing with you right now a slide that comes from a study by David Arston, a professor of education at Michigan State University. And we will share this, the link from which this study comes from in our comments at the end of the presentation today. But this was produced in 2019 and was a comprehensive study of the underlying funding problems with our state's education system. We are now 50th out of 50 states in school funding growth since 1995 as a result of the Prop A legislation which took place in the 90s. Over that time, real funding has declined. We're down 30% in per pupil funding, and that is adjusted for inflation. It hits at-risk students especially hard, with funding having fallen by 60% per pupil there. This causes problems with special education in particular, where $500 per general education student has to be used to make up the difference for special education students. we're going to be getting into the details of the funding picture at the statewide summit, which is a week from today on Saturday, October 17th, with David Arson to go through some of this picture. But I just wanted to lay out that a lot of the issues that we have really are related to the funding mechanism, the loss of revenue. As you can see from the slide, we are down between $3 and $4 billion per year, where we should be for adequate revenue for our schools. And so this has a large problem, is a large cause of the problems that we are seeing with our schools and the decline in performance in our schools since the 90s. This has only gotten worse, as you can imagine, over the last few months with COVID and the economic issues that we're facing today. Michigan, like many other states, has seen a dramatic drop in our monthly revenue, which is going to be causing us problems going into the future. And so our group is really interested in digging into solutions for how we can fix the structural problems with our funding, which are more urgent now than ever with COVID and with the revenue shortfall that we see in our taxes as a result of the pandemic. So I'm going to talk a little bit now more about, and before I go on as well, we have, as a result of some of the funding problems, the threat of privatization, which may be proposed as a solution for our schools as we deal with our funding, structural funding issues. But we know that privatization is not a solution which is helpful for our community schools. And so we are really concerned about making our public schools stronger, making them healthy, thriving, so that we don't have to go down the route of privatization, which is already being proposed in certain corners. And there's a link here in the slide to an article raising this very issue in the Detroit school system. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how we came to the platform that I'll be presenting and walking through for you today. Again, coming out of the issues that I just talked about, our structural funding issues, the stress that's has come to our schools as a result of COVID, we decided to gather educators, parents, students from around the state to really listen to what they see as the major issues that they face in their schools, their anxieties about the future, especially with COVID, and what they hope for, what they would imagine or like to imagine for their schools in order for them to be truly healthy and thriving places in our community. And so we worked in partnership with the Michigan Education Justice Coalition to host a series of listening sessions across northern Michigan, but also around the state, called the Reimagine Education Listening Sessions. These were, by design, sessions that were small so that we could promote intimacy and open expression. There were some really great conversations that came out of them. I led some, and some were led by others. And we were able to have a dialogue, usually in groups of 5 to 10 people, about what we would like our schools to be. We also shared a survey form for those who couldn't attend our listening sessions online. And we had responses from all over the UP in northern Michigan. Some of those places include places like Sheboygan, Petoskey, Harbor Springs, St. Ignace, Sault Ste. Marie, but several other small communities too had people respond and provide their thoughts about the state of education. So in those sessions, we asked 3 basic questions. The first question was, what challenges do you anticipate in the fall due to COVID? And what do you think schools must do to keep students and staff safe? We asked, what should be your school's top spending priorities in their budget? And alternatively, what should not be prioritized or what should be divested from in their school budget? And lastly, we asked, if you could completely reimagine the way schools look after this public health crisis, what would they look like? And so as you can imagine, we had a really interesting discussion that followed in these sessions. We learned a lot. We had many different perspectives. Again, just teachers, educators, parents from our districts. So just ordinary people providing their perspectives. And After that, those summer sessions in September, we started to analyze them to see common threads, to see what were some common points of interest. And we pulled those together to put together the education platform that we want to share with you today. And they come in 5 bullet points. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you some of the conclusions that come from our conversations. Number 1, we heard a lot about, as you can imagine, school funding and school equity. We heard many people say that they wanted a solution to the budget crisis that we see with our schools. And that includes increasing public school funding by a minimum of $3.7 billion annually to get the adequate revenue we need for our schools. We want to see implemented a weighted formula that equitably disperses funding based on need. So schools that are in greater need would receive through a weighted formula, the funds that they need for their students to succeed. We could use that funding to raise teacher salaries, to hire the best educators for our students. And we can finally increase funding for special education programs and resources, which, as I mentioned before, have been especially hit hard. We also heard about the need for resources to provide equitable access to internet and technology. And that is a big issue up here as well. Second thread that came up in our listening sessions was the need for public schools to prioritize and invest in mental health. Now, this is especially significant and important in this time with the pandemic and with our schools being disrupted by the current public health crisis. But it also comes out of long multi-generational rural poverty that is affecting many of our districts. So many of the things that we heard people express were the need to increase funding for social workers, for trauma counselors, for school psychologists, for both students and staff. We heard an expressed need for a mandated and ongoing professional development in restorative and transformative justice in schools, and replacing exclusionary practices such as suspension and expulsion with restorative justice practices. A third point that came up in our discussions, standardized testing. We heard time and again express the need for standardized testing to be eliminated and replaced with curriculum that's evidence-based and developmentally appropriate. We heard from many different corners frustration with standardized testing and what it was doing to our curriculum. So we are calling for a public school curriculum that needs to be culturally sustaining, place-based, anti-racist, and project-based. We would like our teachers to have autonomy and flexibility to adapt curriculum to fit local contexts. And we'd like to have support for our teachers in their work. So we're calling for a mandated and ongoing professional development for trauma-informed practices and implicit biases for all school staff, not just teachers. Fourth point that came up as a common thread was for more involvement between school boards and students and their families. So our fourth point is for public schools to create structures that bring in student voice and leadership, to allow students to provide input on school curriculum, policies, and practices through a student advisory committee, to provide more opportunities for youth leadership and committees, and to invest in programs that allow teachers to foster relationships with parents and families. So to find better way for communication to bring in students and their parents into the education process. Final common thread that we heard during our listening sessions was about budgeting and for public school budgets to reflect our values and needs. And so we have 3 areas that we're hoping to see changes. First, to create structures for participatory budgeting, ensuring that community, educators, and students all have a voice in school budgets. To divest from systems that cause our school communities harm, such as standardized testing. And finally, to take that money and to invest it in systems that support the well-being and safety of our school communities, such as professional school nurses, mental health services, smaller class sizes, and extracurriculars that include sports and art to teach the whole child. So that, in summary, is the platform that comes out, again, of the listening sessions that we held over this summer. Again, with a focus on our area, we wanted to put students, parents, educators first to make sure that their voices are being heard loud and clear in all of the debates that are going on about the direction of our schools. And we wanted to bring them to you as school board candidates to comment on. And so I think at this point, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but that is just fine. I'm going to turn it over to two of my colleagues here, and they are going to introduce themselves and then our school board candidates who are with us today. And so John Griebel and John Lennon, if you would like to unmute yourself and introduce yourselves, maybe John Griebel first, we'll take it to the candidate portion of today's summit.
Are we okay?
We can hear you fine, John. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is John Griebel. I'm presently a teacher of social studies, speech, and drama at Whitefish Township Community Schools in Paradise, Michigan. My road to this position has been long and winding, so to speak, starting in public schools down in Ohio and benefiting from a public school education at Bowling Green State University, through the Peace Corps, where I taught overseas, teaching English as a second language, and then acting as a psychiatric social worker with mental health for 18 years before becoming a teacher in Houghton for approximately 10 years, also directing the drama program there as well. Went back to Michigan Tech to receive a degree in archaeology, but have found myself back teaching now, my 5th year full-time at Whitefish Township. Strongly believe in a public education. I had 2 children raised in the Western UP in the Calumet school system. My son went on to the United States Air Force Academy and is working up in the Boston area. And my daughter ended up going to Western Michigan University before going to Washington University in St. Louis, is now a lawyer in Louisville, Kentucky. So I'm a firm believer in public education and full funding. I'm moved by the decreases in funding that have gone on systemically over the years. And I'm looking for opportunities so that education can be funded for future generations that actually need the assistance to tackle the new problems that they're facing in our world. John?
Hi, I'm John Lennon. I teach at Petoskey High School. This is my 6th year there. Prior to that, I was at Central Michigan University for undergrad. I went there for graduate school as well. I teach 10th and 11th grade English. I'm a soccer coach, a couple other things within the school. And I grew up in Greeley, Michigan, which is just south of here, attended public school there as well. And as a teacher here, just continued to work with groups like Center for Change and the Michigan Education Justice Coalition to advocate for equity in our schools. And that's kind of me.
Excellent. And so I think at this point we have 3 school board candidates with us today. And so if you would like to take 2 or 3 minutes to introduce yourselves, where you're coming from, and why you decided to run for school board, maybe we can start with Denise Petoskey.
Hi, I'm Denise Petoskey. I was lucky to be born and raised in Petoskey. I went to school here. I'm a Petoskey High School graduate in 1990. I have a son who's a current senior at Petoskey High School. I did go to private school after high school. I went to Aquinas College in Grand Rapids. And what I first noticed there was how far ahead I seem to be from some of my private school counterparts. The education I received at Petoskey High School was phenomenal, and the opportunities that I was afforded, back in the late 80s and early 90s. I'm kind of a government nerd, so I got to do, Model UN, and, got to travel for that, which was really fun. I guess I decided to run, probably like a lot of people. I was just a parent that kept showing up to school board meetings. There was a reoccurring issue that kept coming up in terms of the native imagery at Petoskey High School. I kept showing up to board meetings and telling them how I felt, and then I kept getting the impression that they were like, "Well, we don't know how tribal people feel about this," and that was concerning, because I'm like, wow, we keep showing up and telling you how we feel about this. So there was a couple of times there were vacancies on the board. I applied for those unsuccessfully twice before. So I just decided to run this year. And then interestingly enough, after I filed, the president of the school board had resigned, and basically the new president called and said, we heard that you're running. Would you be interested in being appointed? This is what's going on. So I applied again, and then I was lucky enough to be appointed in August. But I'm still on the ballot, and I'm still, interested in engaging my neighbors about what they want to see with the schools.
Thank you, Denise. Maybe we can turn to Mary Kinney at this point.
Hello, am I on? Okay, I see the green. Yeah, my name's Mary Kinney. I grew up in Flint, Michigan, and graduated from Class A school, Kersley High School. And then following that, I got hired in Fisher Body and went through a plant closing. At that time, I decided to go to college. And I went and did my time in college at Mott Community College. Then I decided I needed a bachelor's degree, and went for my bachelor's degree. And then upon finishing that, I got rehired to General Motors and worked my way up. And I ended up in Warren, Michigan. And I worked with a lot of engineering people, buyers, and a lot of processes. And I'm retired now. I've been retired for 4 years, and we moved up north. So I don't know a lot of people up here in Vanderbilt. And I thought running for the school board would give me a good opportunity to start to engage and get to know my neighbors, get to know the people in this area. We have met several neighbors that live close to me, I'd say within a mile. In particular, one of my neighbors has a daughter that's 13, and she doesn't go to Vanderbilt school, which I find kind of odd. I'd like to be part of the board and maybe make Vanderbilt a more attractive school, because she actually goes to Gaylord. So her parents get up and drive her to Gaylord to go to school. And the high school is only 2 miles from their house. So it sparks a lot of concern to me, like, wow, what's wrong with the school? I know it's not about the numbers, about how many people go to school, because I have a nephew that graduated from a high school in Wyoming that only had 5 kids. And he is a top person in the Air Force. Actually, he's on the new Space Force. And he's just leaving right now to go to Dubai for a 6-month project. So I know that it used to bother me that he was a student with only 5 kids in his class. So I know that the number of people in your school is not indicative of how you are going to end up as an adult. because I graduated from a big school, and I used to worry about Kyle only attending a school with 5 kids. But since then, I've changed. Somewhere along the line, I've seen things change, and I guess I just like to be part of that change, and see if we can get more people interested in going to Vanderbilt schools and find out what the real issues are here. So really, that's in a nutshell why I'm running. I just want to be more involved and hopefully make a difference and bring something to the table that I learned from General Motors processings.
Thank you, Mary. At this point, we'll turn it over to Julie Lohila from Sheboygan.
Okay, there we go. My name is Julie Lohila, and I'm running for school board in Sheboygan. I grew up in Warren, Michigan, which is a big city. Moved up here in 1991. I graduated from Wayne State University. I have my master's degree from Grand Valley. I taught in Sheboygan for 27 years. I have a master's in elementary education. I have 7 grandchildren and 2 children who went through the Sheboygan schools. 3 of my 7 are in Sheboygan schools, and 2 actually are in Petoskey schools. So I love being a grandmother. I retired last year. I love being retired, but I feel I really miss that connection to school. There were a lot of things as a teacher that you see that you think, well, maybe someday I could do something about that. Unfortunately, teachers often have the last voice in change in the schools. And I think that needs to be addressed. They're in the trenches and they know what's what. And there needs to be more committees and we need to get information from them on data, and believe me, they have the data to make some decisions. And I feel as a school board member, I would be able to direct the board in directions from a school employee position that would help our district become even better than what it is. So that's about it. I actually feel like I still have a lot to give to education.
Thank you, Julie. And so at this point, I think we'll turn it over to John Lennon to ask the first question. But I think given our time frame, we have time for about 2 to 3 minute responses. We have 3, maybe 4 questions that we'll ask. And so I'll let John Lennon get started with the first question.
Great, thanks, Owen. Our first question is, what does school equity mean to you and your district? And how do you plan to work towards the goal of equity as a school board member? And I don't know, Owen, if you want to just go down the list or who you want to start, but.
We could open it up to whoever wants to go first, I suppose.
Well, since I forgot to put my mute off, I guess I can go. I think that equity for students is very important, and that not only they should be able to find the pathway that they would like to take and be allowed to do that without bias. I've see if I can say this politically. I've seen things in the district happen to students, that pushed them in a direction that they didn't really want to go into, but it was like an option that the school felt was better for them. I have my grandkids going through school right now, and I'm glad that they are in this our district, because there are a lot of options for them to do if they want to be on a pathway for a vocation, or if they want to be on a pathway for college. Those are both available for them there. And even as a homeowner, trying to do things in our, to my home and community, knowing that those trades are so important right now and often forgotten, and making sure that those kids that are ready, who need that and are ready for that, that's available for them. That's very important to me. And no matter, for it to be equitable for everyone is very important.
Okay, well then we can open it up to any other candidates that would like to share their response.
Sure, I'll go. So, when I think about equity, I think about access to opportunities and making sure that all students have the access that they need to all the opportunities presented by the schools. I think more and more we're noticing how important the schools were in just our societal life. If kids don't have access to nutritious food, how are they going to perform in school? I love that all the local districts found ways to get food to kids this summer, and they're still doing that. And those things are things that maybe we don't think about in terms of educational opportunities, but they're incredibly important to the learning environment. Addressing kids that are homeless. I know that a lot of people don't like to think of schools as, teachers as social workers, but that's, in reality, what's going on. I grew up in a pretty turbulent home life, and school was my safe place. That was the place where I knew, how to get praise. And I think that's the case for a lot of kids. It's something structured and it makes sense and it's cause and effect. And we want to make sure that all students have access to those opportunities and they have the ability to meet their potential.
Mary, how about you?
Yeah, I guess I'll just try to keep it simple. In comparison to the one family I mentioned earlier, they're somewhat above average in income, and I know Vanderbilt is kind of a poor district. I don't know much about the school yet, though, but I'm assuming that things aren't quite equal, and that's a reason maybe why my friend sends his child elsewhere. So that's troubling to me, because that tells me maybe things aren't quite as fair or equitable as they could be. So lower income children should have the same advantages as maybe a higher income family would. So I guess maybe I don't really know how to answer this question until I really get in and have get my feet wet and have some background and know what I'm talking about. I'm just making assumptions right now, but I think family incomes has a lot to do with equity and I just, in fairness. So I'd like to make sure that the lower income families, children that go to school, have the same opportunities for learning as someone that might be sending their child to Gaylord to go to school. So I guess in a nutshell, that's just a mini comparison. That's about all I can go on right now. But I'd like to see lower income families have the same opportunity as their income families.
Okay, great. I believe John has the second question, so I will turn it over to him.
All right, folks. This one is looking a little bit more directly toward funding issues. And I guess I'll start maybe in reverse order. Mary, the question is, will you support the work of the Michigan Education Justice Coalition to raise $3.7 billion in new state funding for schools and implement a weighted funding formula? And you have about 2 minutes to respond to that. Mary?
Yeah. Not sure what that means either, but I do see some opportunity out there for funding. But it's going to involve probably a lot of political things that are outside my realm. But I've thought about this a lot because I see some inequities of what's happening in my immediate area. For example, I have an Airbnb in back of me. I have an Airbnb across the street from me, and I have a hip camp to the west of me. All those things those people are not paying taxes to Vanderbilt. That's troubling to me. I don't know how many other places there are in this community that are like that, but I know one of them. I can look on the tax records and see they're even claiming homestead. So there's a lot of opportunity out there for schools to collect more money from people that are making income just because they own a resort, home. I know that's not taxed. That a lot of that stuff is not taxed. I've done some research, and I guess that would be one tip, maybe, that could be looked into is how do we collect it doesn't have to be an exorbitant amount, but these businesses, Airbnb and HipCamp, are out there, and I really don't think they're playing a fair game in comparison to legal businesses that set up campgrounds and have to pay exorbitant amounts to get licenses and permits. And then you have other people, then in comparison to somebody that just buys a cabin next door to me and rents it out for $200 a night, or somebody that rents it across the street for $750 a night. That's just crazy. So I guess that's probably the only tip that I've thought of recently is, and I've done a little bit of research online and see that this is a new thing that's happening across the country where people are taking notice. So.
Okay, well, thank you, Mary. Julie, same question. Basically, will you support the work of the Michigan Education Justice Coalition to raise the $3.7 billion, as we saw in that earlier slide, in new state funding for schools and implement a weighted funding formula? And you also have 2 minutes to respond.
Okay, I definitely would support that. The funding in Michigan has been unfair for as long as I have worked for the school system. Just the things that are available to other students and what in other districts that they have, it makes it very hard to provide the same type of education in small towns. Northern Michigan has been hit hard by the change in the law. I would be honored to be part of that, and I would need some guidance from the Center for Change and how to go about that, and I would be glad to learn as much as I needed to bring that to the school board. And there definitely does need to be a change in the way schools are funded. It's been needed for a very long time now.
Okay, thank you very much. Denise, same question. Will you support the work of the Michigan Education Justice Coalition to raise $3.7 billion in new state funding for schools and implement a weighted funding formula in your district? And again, 2 minutes, if you would, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody thinks that more funding for schools is a bad idea, except for maybe my state representative, Mr. Chatfield. Michigan school funding's been, it wasn't just Prop A that messed it up. I went to school prior to Prop A. I was lucky enough to live in Petoskey in a fluent district. But I know that it wasn't equitable across the state. So I think, Prop A was an attempt to make it equitable. I think it, clearly failed miserably, but it's also, on our state legislators for letting that happen. I think we have an incredible opportunity right now, because every person that has a kid in public school right now realizes how important public schools are. It was this giant wake-up call that they're really the center of our communities, and all of our futures depend on our public schools. So I think that we need to be, as parents, as people on boards, as people just in the community, we need to hold our legislators' feet to the fire to make public schools important. And I think we have, a really good opportunity right now, because it's so evident how important schools are.
Very good. Thank you very much. John, would you like to address the third question?
Yep, I will be happy to. Third question is, do you stand with our platform to build healthy and thriving schools in Michigan? Each candidate will have a couple minutes to give their answer, and please explain why or why not. I'll start over again. We'll start with Denise this time.
Okay. Oh, good. I still have my mic on. Yeah, I think, that's exactly what any parent of a public school student wants. I want a, thriving school. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And it, is different from community to community. I think when we, talk about equity in Petoskey in particular, I think it's apparent that one of my passions is making sure that tribal culture and Native representation are, paramount to what's going on in the schools. Petoskey did have a Native language school or a Native language class in the school, which was great. But I also, because I am the HR director for the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians, I know that the tribe paid for that teacher. It wasn't necessarily the school making that commitment, it was the tribe. And I do think that we can build, relationships with the school and the tribe. It's been, a little bit touchy for the last couple of years, surrounded around the imagery issue. But I think, I think the community is ready to move forward with those kind of collaborations. Was there a second part to that question? I forgot.
No, it was just to explain why or why not. You definitely did that.
Okay.
I will pass it to Julie next. Again, the question is, just as a reminder, do you stand with our platform to build healthy and thriving schools in Michigan? Why or why not?
Okay, as the plan was being described earlier in this presentation, every slide that you went through, I was thinking, yeah, that's exactly what we need. Now that was my first time that I've seen your vision, and I agreed with every single bit of it. I believe that schools need to provide a safe, nurturing environment. And I'm not even sure if all these are on there, but I believe that health and well-being needs to come first before a child can learn, that they need to have those things in place. We've learned so much about trauma in the last few years and the effect that it has on kids. When I was an undergrad, my thesis, when I did my master's, my thesis was on the developmentally appropriate education. Somehow through these years, that's been tossed out the window, and those theorists from long ago are probably rolling over in their graves, seeing how we treat children, and we don't even take into effect that as their age and how they develop. So to have a curriculum that is developmentally appropriate, I saw that on your slide and I was like, wow, that word has been gone from school for the last few years, which is crazy. I taught first grade, by the way, so you can imagine how crazy that was to me. So I would support that. There was not a thing on there that I did not feel like I could support fully. As a board member, I don't, because that's all new to me, I would bring those things to the table in every way that I possibly could. Again, I'm seeing through this that I will need to be more involved with the Center for Change, because I will need guidance on how to get that through the board and to the board. So as a board member, I hope that I can bring those things back into Sheboygan area schools, where we are using what developmentally is appropriate for kids at school. We are treating kids when they mess up in a rehabilitative way instead of a punitive way. All those things are so important to me, and I've seen a lot in the schools, and as a teacher, I was unable to make a difference in those things, and as a school board member, I'm hoping that I can. So.
Okay, thank you very much. I will turn it over to Mary lastly here. Again, the question is, do you stand with our platform to build healthy and thriving schools in Michigan? Why or why not?
Yeah, I absolutely stand with that proposal there. Now, I can only make assumptions because I don't know that much about the school district, but that's kind of good in a way, because I'm not going in with any preconceived ideas. And I can gather from this forum what I can learn to take it onto the board. So I'm totally open-minded to learning this process and using my communication skills to put it forward to whoever's on the board. I think our board went from 7 members down to 5, and I only know that based on doing some research online and Googling this Vanderbilt School Board. So for some reason, there's been some troubling things that's happened on this school board, because they've had difficulty keeping members based on some news articles I've read from the Petoskey News about what has been happening at Vanderbilt. It's going to be very interesting to get into that arena and find out what are the issues, how can we make it better. And I suspect a lot of it has to do with fair and very open communication with one another to get to the bottom of whatever it is that's troubling in the adult school board, and how it affects the children in the classroom and the teachers. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm looking forward to passing any messages on that I can learn from this forum.
Okay, great. Thank you to our candidates. I don't know, Owen, if we have more time or not for the 4th question, but I will hand it back over to you or John or whoever is the appropriate person for this step.
Yeah, I think we do have time for one last question, and I'll pass it over to John Griebel to take us through that.
Again, I want to thank all the candidates for showing up and sharing, and it's refreshing to see a forum in which people can express their ideas, and of course you're not competing with each other, but indeed we are competing with ideas and systemics, things that we need, obviously across the board, see need adjusting. So I'd like to offer each of the candidates an additional time to express what else do you want your voters in your districts to know about you and your priorities around public education. And I know in previous answers you've expressed where you're coming from and feelings, and I guess this is a time for you to express what else you think you'd like to get out there for folks who will be able to access this. So I'm going to start with Julie, if you would like to go first on this. Give you about, I see we have at least 2 minutes if you really need it. So please go ahead.
Okay, well, I would like the voters to know that I would do everything I could for students first, that they would always be my first priority, that if I didn't know the answer to something, I would research it. I would want committees. I would want people to ask all stakeholders to be involved, because without that, it takes everyone to educate a child, and I would do the best I could for the students of Sheboygan. They would always come first.
Thank you, Julie. Mary, if you'd like to come up with anything else you'd like the voters to know. I know you've expressed how you're open to learning more of the process. So Mary, what else would you like voters to know? Again, why you got involved with your priorities around public education?
Yeah, this was just kind of thrown at me, really. I guess I would like to say that I have a lot that I can share with people from my background, and I'm sitting up here by myself with my husband, and I feel like this is a calling. Actually, my husband nominated me to do this. He's like, "Oh, there's an opening on the school board." It's kind of like sometimes you just know things are right, and the right moments in your life to do things. And it's time. It's time for me to do things. It's time for me to get out of the rut. I've done everything I wanted to do in retirement the last 4 years. And I just feel like I want to be more open and not, this COVID thing has made us so into ourselves, I guess. And I want to get out and be with people somehow. This has got to be the way to go, to see if I can be of some value. I feel like I have some value to share with the community, and I see that need just driving around the neighborhood. I just have a sense about what's going on. Don't know for sure, but I just like to share whatever values I can share and communicate with each other. So that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary. And again, then I'll ask the same question for Denise. What else would you like your prospective voters to know in your district about you and your priorities for public education in your district? And go right ahead.
I think simply just, I love these schools. I went to this school. I love the opportunities that it provided. I continue to be impressed with the opportunities that my son is providing. As a parent, I wanted to be involved. And, from a tribal community, we haven't had representation on a school board ever. So I think, I'm looking forward to hopefully opening up some lines of communication for folks who haven't been engaged on the school board level before.
Well, thank you very much to all of the candidates for spending time with us and for answering our questions and giving the voters something to contemplate here, hopefully moving forward for the future of better education for all of our students. So thank you for the opportunity. I'll turn it back over to Owen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John, and thank you to all the candidates for coming today on a beautiful fall day and spending it online with us on Zoom. And we really appreciate your answers. We were eager to share them with the public. And we have a few other messages before we sign off that are very important that I want to have Joanne walk us through. And I'm going to share my screen again with a few of those messages. Oh, maybe John can give me, or sorry, Paul can give me the ability to share my screen. Paul, if you're the...
I'm gonna wait.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I should be able to share my screen and the slide. Okay, so there is our first message. Joanne, over to you.
Yes, I'm gonna adjust my screen. There we go. Good, I'm learning as we go today. So when you share your screen, it wants to flip up and cover my whole screen, and I'm operating on a split screen so I can see two different documents at a time. So anyway, I'm ready to roll now. I wanted to, I appreciate Owen mentioned it, but I also want to thank our three candidates for joining us today. That's Denise Petoskey with the Petoskey School Board, and Julie Lohala from Sheboygan, and Mary Kinney from Vanderbilt. So thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. I wanted to draw everyone's attention to the school board candidate questionnaires. That is a project of the Michigan Education Justice Coalition. And they had a website that went live just this past week. And there are candidate questionnaires from school board candidates from all over Michigan. They're organized on here alphabetically by school district. And it's really quite interesting to go in and read them. They've asked them questions as simple as, why do you want to be a school board member? To what does education justice mean to you, and specifically in the context of your school district? And then if you completely reimagine the way schools look after this public health crisis, what would they look like? And they asked them to describe how they think parents, students, and families should be involved in making decisions in the schools. And then as basic as asking them their 3 educational priorities or goals for their school district, and what challenges they anticipate this school year with COVID, and what they think their district needs to do to keep students safe. And a question very specifically about spending priorities. They have them weigh in on standardized testing and talk about the impact of the school district's curriculum and what information or what they might change about that curriculum. A couple of the questions that they asked that I thought were very interesting and enlightening in terms of just showing the differences sometimes across the state is one of the questions asked, did you receive any endorsements? And another question asked, who is funding your candidate campaign? I'm going to guess, I can't see the candidates right now, but I'm going to guess they're giggling for just a moment. So anyway, I also wanted to draw everyone's attention to the Michigan Education Justice statewide education forum being held next Saturday, October 17th. And that is going to be an opportunity for us to hear from our State Board of Education candidates and from the U.S. Senate candidates, so Gary Peters and John James. So that will really help to inform you as you vote for candidates and are looking for candidates that would align with your values. So again, they'll be presenting the platform similar to what we presented today. That is a culmination of the listening sessions and the questionnaires that have been distributed throughout the state over the months of July, August, and September here in the past few months. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I think there's going to be a lot of helpful information there. So I also, as the Center for Change, one of our missions is to really to become a source of accurate information about elections and the election process and voting in Northern Michigan. And so to that end, I just want to mention today that we're in the middle of an election season. With the changes that came forth with Proposal 3 in 2018, there's no longer just an election day in Michigan. It's an election season. There's 40 days of voting. I spoke with a voter in a small rural area just the other day who mentioned that typically their precinct would have under 2,000 votes cast. And when they voted at their clerk's office earlier this week, there was already 1,100 ballots had been cast in a district that typically would have under 2,000. So people are voting every day. There's many ways for you to vote in Michigan. It's easy to vote in Michigan now. You can call your clerk and have a ballot sent. You can go online and print out an application and mail it to your clerk. You can stop by the clerk's office and fill out the application for the ballot and then ask, and then fill it out and turn it right back into them. Or you can take it home and then mail it back to them, drop it back off to them. Or over the course of the last month, lots of secure ballot boxes have been installed all over the state. Our clerks have had them previously, but there was a big push to make them more readily available because the goal is to make it easy for people to vote. It shouldn't need to be difficult. It shouldn't be hard to fit in your schedule. And so we're very excited that voting is becoming much, much easier in Michigan now. So I also just want to draw everyone's attention to the Center for Change has a website. You can find that at the letter C, number 4, letter C, mi.org. And there you can learn about each of our 7 task forces. You can meet all of our leadership team. All of our beautiful photos are posted there with a little introduction. You can, we invite you, encourage you to follow us on Facebook at Center for Change, a Northern Michigan advocacy group. This month, we're really focusing on putting out accurate election information for the state of Michigan there. And then throughout ongoing, you'll find information there about learning to advocate for things that you want to see changed, as well as learning about more information and becoming educated about the various issues that might be of concern to you that are of concern to our members on our 7 task forces. So anyway, with that, I'll go ahead and just toss it back over to Owen in case I've missed anything. He'll come through with a broom and sweep that up and make sure it's covered, and I'll let him sign off.
Great, thank you, Joanne. Yes, just one final thing in addition to the call to vote is encourage your friends and family and neighbors to vote as well. If you would like to join in a nonpartisan get out the vote effort, the Michigan Education Justice Coalition has a great program. I put the website that you could go to on the slide here. But if you're interested in taking part in that, go to the link, sign yourself up, and they'll be in touch with you about how you can help make that happen, again, in a nonpartisan frame, simply sharing voting information and encouraging your friends and neighbors to vote. But I think that's it for us today. So again, thank you to all the candidates. Thank you to our moderators, John Griebel from Up in Paradise, John Lennon from Petoskey, and to all of you for watching. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.